Hello, my name is Adam Newman, and I work in the Site Reliability Engineering Department at USAA. And I'm here to talk to you today about the origins of USAA's Postmortem of the Week. And it's been an absolutely fantastic journey that we've gone through over the last 2 to 3 years. And I'd like to share with you some of our best practices and tips and tricks. And hopefully it will inspire you to potentially do a large postmortem review meeting for your IT department or organization or sphere of influence. If you don't know anything about USAA, we provide banking and insurance products for the military community. Among other things, great company to work for. I've been at USAA since I graduated college. So it's been 12 years. I've been at USAA 12 years. Was in the banking area, worked on remote deposit capture for several years, have several patents in that space, absolutely love it. Had the opportunity to go to site reliability engineering when it started up, and I really love doing what I do there. And I am an avid dad joke teller. By the way, this is the picture of me when I graduated college. So this is my mugshot. Yeah. And speaking of dad jokes, I have to give you an obligatory introductory joke because that is what I do. And so, what do you call the engineer on your team? And everyone has one of these. You know exactly who I'm talking about. What do you call the engineer on your team who goes MIA for 3 days and then pops out with some amazing new code, feature, product, website, I don't know, etc. What do you call that person? And wait for it, you call them a site reliability engineer. Most of you probably groaned, but this is your cue to laugh. Once again, since this is being recorded virtually, I can't be offended if you groaned, and that is probably for the better. So, what is USAA's Postmortem of the Week? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a weekly meeting. We run it Thursdays at 11 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Central, which is where I am. Everyone and their mom's invited. Well, everyone in IT is invited. If your mom doesn't work in IT, she's not invited. Everyone's invited. We talk about bad things. We talk about failures. We talk about oops moments. We talk about the big outages. That's what we talk about. And from those outages, we throw people under the bus because it's so much fun to throw people under the bus. I love throwing other people under the bus. Don't you know we don't throw people under the bus? That is the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. The purpose of this meeting is to bring large outages out in the open and for people not to get thrown under the bus and instead be praised, applauded, and to look at for their heroic actions, which is typically that, but then also look at how we can improve collectively by looking at systems. And that is how, and that is what this meeting is about. Note that this meeting occurs well after the post-incident discussion, whether you call that a debrief, whether you call it the postmortem meeting, etc. This is a meeting after that. This is a polished presentation. And it's not about trying to find action items. Those things have already been done. The lessons have already been talked about within that team. This meeting is to disseminate that information that was gleaned to the larger IT community so that we can collectively get better and learn from failure. It's very important. So if you wanted to stand up an IT-wide, depending on how large your organization is, an IT-wide postmortem review meeting every week, it would be pretty simple, right? I mean, you set up a meeting, you get a bunch of water bottles or virtual water bottles, I don't know. You invite a bunch of people. It's, just get a big distro list and send it out. Get an executive to sponsor it. We have the vice president of availability assurance at USAA. This isn't the vice president of availability assurance, by the way. Come and speak to it, intro it, something like that. And then we find an interesting or typically significant outage to talk about, like the piano that fell through, the second story floor. And so it's, easy peasy, right? Except for one small detail, which is how do you get people to talk, especially about their outages? And I ask you this question somewhat rhetorically. What would it look like today if your largest outages were spoken about, and maybe this is the case in your organization, I don't know, but the largest outages in your organization were spoken about in front of the entire IT organization, what would that like look like? And I think for many of us, and this happened some at USAA, it would just be like a big finger pointing session. And remember, we have this conversation after the actual debrief, postmortem, et cetera. We bring it in front of the IT organization, and it's so easy for others who, again, don't know much about that application, infrastructure, et cetera, to just do more finger pointy type questions, blameful questions. And so because of that fear and sometimes the reality of it, the engineer who caused the outage or whose system was impacted, et cetera, they don't want to talk at all. In fact, you say, hey, we would love for you to speak about your outage in front of the entire IT organization. They're probably going to say, you are out of your mind. I will not do that. Why would I want, I'm not a masochist, you know? Why would I want to inflict more pain on myself? I've already caused enough pain and damage to my, organization, whatever, right? And so it's hard to get people to talk about outages. And so therein lies the challenge. The meeting and all that stuff, logistics, marketing, et cetera, that's easy. Well, relatively easy. The hard part is, how do you get people excited to talk about their mistakes? And therein lies, the whole problem with this meeting that we've run into, at least. And the answer is, and it's not the easiest answer in the world, but it really requires a lot of preparation. It's like you're building this conversation that you're having. Again, after the debrief, after the postmortem conversation, this polished presentation needs a little bit of love. It's like you're building a soup, and you need to actually cut. You can't just throw the zucchini and the squash and I don't know what you put in your soups, broccoli, celery, carrots, whatever. You don't just throw them in. Like, there needs to be a little bit of preparation. Like, you should probably cut up your vegetables before you put them in the soup. And this is a very important part of making a meeting like this successful. You need to prepare with your speaker. And the preparation you need to do is to get them literally to get them excited about the conversation. Now, what better way to get people excited about talking about their mistakes than to have them talk about how the technology works? It's amazing how, if I go talk to an infrastructure engineer and just say, like, tell me how the network works. Tell me how databases work. Tell me how storage infrastructure works. Tell me how your application functions and the flow chart around it. And we don't even talk about the outage yet. People seem to be very excited to talk about what they work on, mostly because we take pride in our work. Like, that's what we do. And so if you just get people to talk about how their application functions or how the infrastructure functions, it'll lead seamlessly into this, well, now let's talk about what went wrong. Let's put a red X on this part that broke, and let's talk about it a little bit. And it eases people into a less blameful conversation because they see that we are interested collectively. And this is what gets talked about, is the collective interest in the infrastructure or application itself. If something brings down half the website, people are interested in understanding how it works. And so it's a great teaching, learning opportunity. And then you just put the red X where it broke. You talk briefly about the outage. And then you talk about, when it comes to action items, again, polished presentation. We can talk a little bit about the human errors that were made, the process gaps that need to be addressed. But this conversation is geared for IT engineers. And so the action items we discuss are resiliency things that make the system better. And again, this is an important tenet of blameless culture, that you focus on the system and you don't focus on the person. Well, if you exemplify that in a large meeting like this, a great example would be, here's a database that didn't have we call it high availability or a failover mechanism. It was a standalone database, as an example. And one of the things we're looking at is this $2 million investment, I don't know how much it costs, to instantiate a secondary database that makes things more resilient. Those are the types of things that will resonate with the IT engineering community, and it shifts blame away from individuals and helps focus on systems. Again, this is just a basic tenet of a blameless culture, but this is important that we highlight those action items and not necessarily dwell on these other mental mistakes, although it's fun to talk about them. And if your speaker is okay, saying, I'll be the brunt of a bad joke or something because I made an oops moment. I wrote a script that self-deletes itself like I did way back when, then you can add stuff like that in. The other thing that's important is to really hone in on the lessons learned where they made a mistake, but how can you internalize that mistake or that lesson that they learned to the entire IT community? Man, I used to think that this meant, the X meant Y, but X really meant Z. Well, maybe there are others in the organization that thought X meant Y also. Well, we can collectively educate the entire IT community in those types of lessons so that we collectively don't make the same mistakes. A huge bonus that we've seen in these meetings is if you can get the customer or the client to also come in and speak about what they're doing about the outage. A great example of this is you have like a database problem and the customer of the database comes in and database team talks about it. The customer talks about what they're doing to make themselves more resilient from a database failure, like an internal cache or a secondary data store or retry logic, or even better, retry logic that doesn't encounter a thundering herd problem. And you talk about those technical things, it makes for an incredibly more blameless conversation, because now you've got a customer who is not saying, man, it's the database team's fault. No, they're taking initiative, and everyone's seeing this, a customer taking initiative saying, this is what I can do to isolate myself from a infrastructure failure or a dependency failure. And it really hammers home blameless when you can get multiple teams speaking, especially the customer or the client of the thing that broke. Another thing we've realized is in the conversation itself, when we have this meeting, we control the injects into it. We don't let people talk. We lock that down. We allow people to inject via a messaging type platform or messaging system, and we control what questions are actually asked. We don't necessarily verbatim ask all the questions that people ask, especially if they're finger pointy type questions. And many times we can even answer them in the chat while the conversation is going on. But that control really helps your speaker to feel more safe. Like, I know for sure no random person is going to be throwing me under the bus. Another important element of this is adding some sort of a humor element. Again, this could be a personal preference. I think humor is incredibly important in these conversations that are talking about very serious outages. And so if you can find a way to inject humor into the conversation, whether that's a video to start the conversation, to get people loosened up, or I like to do a dad joke at the end of every conversation and everyone knows it's coming and it's bad. I make them up myself. As you saw with that other one that was really bad, I got another one for you. It really helps lighten the mood where people can really learn from failure. So those are the tips that I would give you if you were interested in starting up a meeting like this. Again, the logistics is not the difficult part. It's really the behavioral change that you're trying to instill by getting people excited to talk about their problems. And that is key to making a meeting like this work, a postmortem review meeting that is a large or all-encompassing of your IT organization. The results that we've seen from this is we've seen a growth from about 50 people to well over 200. Sometimes we hit 300 and 400 people attend this meeting. Really good opportunity to grow a reliability or resiliency or SRE type community. Really, really good. We've seen it also increase collaboration between teams, forcing the app team to talk about how they can be resilient from a database. Our database failure has really helped teams not point fingers at each other anymore, but instead collaborate and say, how can we collectively get better? And we've seen a huge increase in that behavior change between teams who have dependencies on each other. And then, of course, I feel like we've created a very safe space for people to speak. If you have an outage, if you make a huge blunder, it's okay. You can come to this meeting. You're going to talk about it. We're going to empathize with you. We've all been in the boat you're in, and we can collectively grow and get better as an organization because of your failure. A famous executive of mine at USAA said, do not let an outage go to waste. I don't know if you made that up, but I fully embody that and embrace it in this meeting. We don't want our outages to go to waste. We want to learn and grow from them. And this is a safe space to do that. All right, I got another bad joke for you. Did you hear about the developers who spent all their time after the outage talking about how great of a troubleshooter they were? Man, if I wasn't on that call, man, we would have been there all night, that type of a thing. You might have people like that at your organization. And so, yeah, it was a great post-mortem instead of post-mortem. All right. Cue the groaning or laughter, hopefully, once again. Next steps, just two quick little things. One, at USAA, we're looking at how to actually make this into little micro postmortem of the weeks. Some teams are already taking this on in how they can build postmortem review meetings. Again, large scale, you should have internal postmortem review meetings within your team. That's very important. But then how can you get high profile ones to a larger audience? We've seen teams do this for their larger audiences. The one that we do is for the entire IT organization, but trying to break that up into smaller pieces might prove beneficial. We're kind of experimenting with that. And then if you are interested in doing something like this yourself, it is something I'm personally very invested in. It has significantly made my my work atmosphere so much better. It's radically changed my desire and ability to succeed, knowing that I can fail and knowing we're going to learn from failure. It's just really helped me, and I think it's helped USAA as a whole. And so if you're interested in doing something like this, I'm personally very invested in this. I will spend my free time to try to help you stand up and give you tips and tricks in standing up your very own postmortem of the week, if you so choose. So here's my email address here. You can probably find me on LinkedIn as well. I'd love to help you. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Hopefully it was helpful, a little bit entertaining. Hopefully you didn't hate the jokes too much, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much for your time.